Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Roberto Benetello, and I'm the Executive Director of the Business Council for Sustainable Development Malaysia, BCSD Malaysia for short. Welcome to this online event entitled COP26 and Beyond, Investment in Green and Resilient Infrastructure. This event is brought to you by BCSD Malaysia in collaboration with the Embassy of Italy in Kuala Lumpur and the British High Commission in Kuala Lumpur. I wish to start by thanking all attendees for spending your afternoon with us today. I also want to thank the distinguished speakers who have agreed to join us today. We will introduce them one by one in a few moments. So, ladies and gentlemen, before we go into the topic of the day, allow me to remind you who we are. We are the Business Council for Sustainable Development Malaysia, BCSD Malaysia Berhad, and we are an independent and non-profit organization that helps companies embed sustainability into core business and into operations. BCSD Malaysia is a global network partner in Malaysia of the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, also known as WBCSD. Through education, training, capacity building, and a special project, we want to drive system transformation, which is vital to transition to a world where over 9 billion people can live well and within the planetary boundaries by 2050. We call this Vision 2050. At the same time, we strive also to make more sustainable business more successful. So to create that link between sustainability performance and the success of a business in the long term. Like WBCSD, we work with the business mostly around 6 main program areas where systems transformation is badly needed, and they are circular economy, cities and mobility, climate and energy, food and nature, social issues and human rights, and another area that we call redefining value, and it's got to do with stakeholders management, ESG risk management, reporting, governance, and assurance. In these areas, we initiate projects with concrete and measurable output. They all take a science-based approach and aim for targeted business solutions. Ladies and gentlemen, the quality and design of infrastructure play a key role in shaping how we live, what we do, and how we interact in almost every aspect of life. Climate-related events are increasing in frequency and in severity, and the focus on trying to limit their impact through adaptation measures has become really essential. Green infrastructure presents a huge investment opportunity globally, also in Malaysia, but globally, with an estimated USD 100 trillion worth of climate-compatible infrastructure required between now and 2030. This is in order to meet the Paris Agreement emission reduction target. Also in Malaysia, Malaysia needs a cumulative infrastructure investment of roughly USD 460 billion between 2016 and 2040. And in order to meet Malaysia's Paris Agreement targets, much of this investment needs to be directed at green infrastructure. After COP26 and the global spread of net zero pledges that we have seen, it is really timely to discuss the challenges and opportunities of incorporating ESG considerations in infrastructure investment decision-making. Today, our esteemed speakers will share with us some insightful presentations and case studies that can shed light on the link between decision-making in infrastructure investment and ESG considerations. Today's program will last for 2 hours and 15 minutes, to be precise. We are very, very honored to have BCSD Malaysia's chairman, Professor Emeritus Tan Sri Dr. Zachary Abdul Hamid, deliver a welcome address. As you know, COP26 hosted by the UK and Italy just concluded on November 13th, just a few days ago. However, the effort does not stop there, as UK and Italy will maintain the presidency up to COP27 that will take place in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt next year. A lot of big decisions need to be made between now and then, a lot of them, very ambitious decisions. As part of this extraordinary effort, both Italy and the UK, through the diplomatic posts around the world, are organizing and supporting events and initiatives such as this one of today that can increase awareness and understanding around and beyond COP26 and the necessity to accelerate climate action. Ladies and gentlemen, today we are very honored to have the ambassador of Italy to Malaysia, His Excellency Massimo Rustico, and the British High Commissioner to Malaysia, His Excellency Charles Hay, to officiate our event with their opening remarks. The first part of the program includes a keynote presentation from Saipan and Bank Pembangunan Malaysia Berhad, BPMB, followed by a short Q&A session. During the second part of the program, there will be a case study. There will be case studies from Italy and from the UK, followed by what we call it a fireside chat, during which we will discuss challenges and opportunities in relation to how green infrastructure projects can be financed and executed, but also in Malaysia. Ladies and gentlemen, before we kick off, allow me to share with you a couple of housekeeping items. The whole proceeding of our event today is being recorded. Participants will be kept on mute during the event. However, feel free to type your questions in the question panel. We will try to answer them, time allowing, during the Q&A session at the end. Now, without further ado, let us start the event with a welcome address by our chairman, Professor Emeritus Tan Sri Zachary Abdul Hamid. Tan Sri Zachary is also ambassador and science advisor to the Campaign of Nature. He's a former UN official and a senior fellow of the Academy of Sciences Malaysia. He's had a distinguished career in science as a researcher, educator, administrator, diplomat, and also as the former science advisor to the Prime Minister of Malaysia. Awarded the federal honorific title Tan Sri by Malaysia's head of state in 2014, he served until 2016 as the founding chair of the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, also known as IPBES, and was one of the 26 members of the UN Secretary General's Scientific Advisory Board. We invite Tan Sri Zachary to deliver the welcome address and officiate the event. Tan Sri, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Roberto, for your very generous introduction. Let me welcome His Excellency, the British High Commissioner to Malaysia, the Italian Ambassador to Malaysia, distinguished Mr. Arshad, the President of Bank Pembangunan Malaysia Berhad, distinguished speakers, panelists, ladies and gentlemen. The COP26 summit concluded on 13th of November in Glasgow, and it is now crucial for us to work harder towards the implementation of the pledges that have been made. Given the accelerating climate impacts already being experienced across the world, there's never been a more urgent need for international finance and cooperation to manage and build resilience towards climate change impacts. Ladies and gentlemen, during COP26, we saw nature being paramount on the agenda, with a full COP day dedicated to it. depicting how interconnected the challenges and solutions between climate and nature. By recognizing nature as an opportunity for an effective solution, and by integrating more green infrastructure into existing and future built developments, we can create more livable cities. According to the UK Landscape Institute position statement in 2013, the role of green infrastructure in addressing the challenges of the 21st century cannot be underestimated. It is a natural service providing infrastructure that is often more cost-effective, resilient, and capable of meeting social, environmental, and economic objectives than the so-called gray infrastructure. Investing in green infrastructure can lead to abundant environmental, social, and economic benefits by reducing pollution, decreasing energy costs, improving health and well-being, and increasing resilience to climate change and natural disasters. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, during COP26, we saw the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero, a coalition made up of some of the world's largest and most influential banks, insurers, and investors, pledging around 130 trillion US dollars into supporting green investment, climate disclosures, and reporting. There was also the launch of the International Sustainability Standards Board, a long-desired global baseline for capital market sustainability, sustainability disclosure that will truly set the world up for consolidation and standardization of materially based reporting on greenhouse gas emission. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, our mother organization, the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, WBCSD, has also launched the Business Manifesto for Climate Recovery in the COP26 Business Pavilion. The manifesto is the first time that the world's most sustainable, ambitious businesses have used their collective voice to outline what is required to accelerate global climate recovery. It sets out 12 action priorities framed around reducing, removing, and reporting emissions, highlighting the public-private collaboration required to drive climate action. Ladies and gentlemen, among the key points in the manifesto, one of the priority actions is to cut emissions in the built environment. We have to create radical collaboration across all stakeholders to focus on the whole life cycle impact of building and infrastructure activities. After the global spread of net zero pledges, it is timely for us to share some actionable insights on how to unlock more opportunities for green infrastructure investment in Malaysia. So, ladies and gentlemen, this investment in green and resilient infrastructure webinar is part of the COP26 and Beyond series, organized by BCSD Malaysia in collaboration and support of the British High Commission in Malaysia and the Embassy of Italy in Malaysia. This collaboration is a meaningful step towards increasing awareness and understanding around COP26 and the necessity to accelerate action towards the goals of the Paris Agreement and the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. So to conclude, to our esteemed speakers and experts, we thank you for your generous insights on the link between decision-making in infrastructure investment and ESG consideration. And to all our attendees, we thank you for being here with us today. We hope you will enjoy the speakers' presentation and informative speeches. Terima kasih. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Tan Sri Zachary, for the welcome address. Thank you for so nicely and adequately setting the scene for what is coming this afternoon, what is coming today. Our next esteemed guest is His Excellency Massimo Rustico, Ambassador of Italy to Malaysia. Let me just give you a couple of information about Ambassador Rustico. Prior to his appointment, Ambassador Rustico was Ambassador of Italy to Hungary. Before that, he served as at the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation as coordinator for the international business development of the Italian construction industry. His Excellency has also been awarded the honors of the Knight Officer of the Order of Merit of the Republic in 1992 and the Commander of the Order of Merit of the Republic in 2021. His Excellency is unfortunately unable to be with us today, but he recorded a message yesterday and we're going to listen to his message. So over to Ambassador Rustico's speech.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be part of this forum on green and resilient infrastructures organized by the Business Council for Sustainable Development in collaboration with the Embassy of Italy and the British High Commission, which follows the first forum on smart cities that took place on October 21st. I would like to thank the Malaysian Ministry of Environment and Water, the Malaysian Green Technology and Climate Change Center, and the other organizers of the International Green Tech and Eco Products Exhibition and Conference Malaysia, IGEM, for hosting this forum within the exhibition-related events. I would like to recognize Professor Emeritus Tan Sri Dr. Zachary Abdul Hamid and Mr. Roberto Benetello from the Business Council for Sustainable Development, His Excellency the British High Commissioner to Malaysia, Charles Hay, and all the other speakers for their contribution to this forum. The increasing human activities from pollution to the consumption of soil are inevitably compromising the ecosystem and the resilience of our territories. From the recognition of these problems comes the need to develop a network of green infrastructures able to promote new energy production models, to preserve urban biodiversity, to enhance climate resilience, and to reduce the need for energy to cool and heat buildings. Italy is strongly committed in the development of green infrastructures through the implementation of the National Recovery and Resilience Plan, which is focused on the green and digital transition and sustainable public transport. During the COP26, Italy was among the countries which have announced their intention to stop public funding for projects related to gas, oil, and coal, currently worth around $16 billion, with the exception of those that appear to be consistent with the limit of a rise in heating of 1.5 degrees Celsius and with the objectives of the Paris Agreement. In parallel, the engagement of the Italian regions and municipalities towards the creation of green and resilient infrastructures and the rational use of energy and renewable sources has strongly increased in the last few years. in order to regenerate the urban and peri-urban areas. In this respect, I'm pleased to acknowledge among the speakers of this forum the presence of Ms. Claudia Carani, senior expert at the Energy and Sustainable Development Agency in Modena, who will give us deep insight on the Lemon project implemented in the Emilia-Romagna region. The objective of the project is to balance economic, environmental, and social aspects of living through investments in energy efficiency, aiming at creating sustainable buildings. The Italian landscape has also been witnessing a growing presence of companies engaged in the creation of green infrastructures. Among them, I would like to quote Saipem, which is strongly engaged in the energy transition, from the construction of offshore green energy hubs to CO2 storage projects and the construction of infrastructures for the production, storage, and use of hydrogen. One of its latest projects focuses on large-scale green hydrogen production and transport infrastructures in Italy, fully in line with the European decarbonization strategy. In this regard, I welcome the presence today with us of Ms. Giovanna Villari from Saipem, who will tell us about the Puglia Green Hydrogen Valley. In view of the above, I believe that we have common interests and common objectives in terms of sustainability targets and engagement in developing green and resilient infrastructures, and we are eager to further foster our relationship with public and private Malaysian partners. I thank you very much.
Okay, I guess we're back live. Sorry, there's been a little bit of a technical issue, but I hope you can hear me all okay now. Thank you very much, His Excellency Massimo Rustico. Today, we are also very honored to have the British High Commissioner to Malaysia, His Excellency Charles Hai, to share a few words with us. Let me just give you some information about the ambassador. Prior to his role, the Ambassador Hai was the British ambassador to South Korea from 2015 to 2018. During his time in the British diplomatic services, he has been posted to the Czech Republic, Spain, and the UK representation to the EU in Brussels. His Excellency was also the Director of Consular Services in London, responsible for assisting British nationals in crisis management worldwide. Let's give a warm welcome to His Excellency Charles Hay to deliver the opening remarks and kickstart our discussion. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much indeed, Roberto. Tan Sri Zachary Abdul Hamid, Chairman BCSD, and in his absence, His Excellency Massimo Rustico, Ambassador of Italy to Malaysia, distinguished panelists and guests. Just 12 days ago, the UN Climate Change Conference, or COP26, concluded in Glasgow, with 197 countries agreeing the Glasgow Climate Pact. This affirms the vital importance of keeping global warming to below 1.5 degrees through accelerating climate action in this decisive decade and delivering on promises to aid in the climate transition and build resilience in climate vulnerable countries. I think huge progress has been made over the 2 years. When the UK took over the role of COP26 presidency in partnership with Italy 2 years ago, just 30% of the world economy was covered by net zero commitments. After COP26, and with the Prime Minister announcing Malaysia's own carbon neutral goal in the 12th Malaysia Plan, Malaysia is among the 90% of the world economy with this type of net zero commitment. And investing in sustainable infrastructure will be crucial to delivering this climate ambition. So at Glasgow's COP, we kept 1.5 in sight. But now we need to deliver on our pledges and close the gap to 1.5. And we're going to need to do that through partnership and collaboration. And as an example of acting together, at the G7 summit hosted by the UK in June, G7 countries, which of course includes both UK and Italy, launched the Build Back Better for the World initiative. This is going to give developing countries access to better and faster finance for infrastructure investment while accelerating the climate transition. At COP26, the UK launched the new ASEAN Catalytic Green Finance Facility, which is a £100 million fund to support the development of green infrastructure projects. This could be in renewable energy, or zero emissions transport, or sustainable water management, or urban facilities. But the underlying objective is that these have to help manage emissions and promote climate resilient development while addressing infrastructure needs. This facility is going to be delivered by the Asian Development Bank, and it reflects the UK's strategic partnership with ASEAN, of which we are now a dialogue partner. And it shows that the UK is stepping up efforts with our partners to support Southeast Asian countries in financing clean, green, climate resilient infrastructure that is reliable and trustworthy. As another example of working together, the High Commission co-organised Malaysia Climate Action Week with the British Malaysia Chamber of Commerce. This launched the BMCC Climate Action Pledge, which 27 Malaysian companies and institutions have now signed up to. This is a first commitment to setting climate goals and to build a community of practice around Malaysian climate action. Tan Sri Zachary has already talked about the Glasgow Financial Alliance and Net Zero, so I won't repeat his words, but I think the point is that this all shows a growing momentum in the global financial system. Financial institutions are moving to shift their assets to align with the Paris Agreement. Infrastructure that is not climate resilient and inefficient may soon become stranded assets. Banks like CIMB and Maybank are setting net zero goals that will affect their financing decisions. More ambitious ESG requirements, as institutional investors like EPF, Khazanah Nasional and PNB are demonstrating, make infrastructure investment a race to the top. Capital Markets Malaysia has been a partner of the High Commission in work on green finance. And I know that Zelina will be able to say more on this rapidly changing investment landscape during the fireside chat. Today, I hope that our speakers will be able to identify investment options, opportunities, and lessons on preparing our infrastructure for a 1.5 degree world. At Glasgow, we kept 1.5 alive, but delivering on its promise requires that we work together for our planet, and infrastructure investment is a vital place to start. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, and thank you for pointing out the necessity to align infrastructure investment with sustainability and ESG considerations. I hope that today we're going to give our small contribution to this narrative, to this theme. Thank you again. Now we shall move to the first presentation, which is challenges and opportunities in developing the Green Hydrogen Valley by engineer Giovanna Villari from the Italy headquartered Saipem. Saipem is one of the world's largest oil field service companies based in San Donato Milanese, just in the outskirts of Milan. The Green Hydrogen Valley is the project that will be explained to us, is a large-scale production of green hydrogen that will come into operation over the next few years. And basically to support mostly the oil and gas industry and the transportation sector in the path towards decarbonization. So extremely important to understand how this green hydrogen can come to assist the decarbonization of the oil and gas and the transport sector. Giovanna Villari is a commercial manager for sustainable technologies at Saipem, with over 15 years of experience in the engineering and oil and gas industry. She gained her professional experience through the management of large-scale oil and gas projects, from concept selection to engineering, procurement, and construction, also known as EPC. So without further ado, I would like to pass the floor to Giovanna.
Thank you, Roberto, and good morning, good afternoon to everyone. My name is Giovanna Villari. I'm Saipem Commercial Manager for Sustainable Technologies, and today I will give you an overview on a pipeline of projects that Saipem is pursuing in the green hydrogen field. But before starting, next slide, please. I will give you an overview on Saipem activities. Next, please. Saipem is a technological and engineering platform for the design, construction, and startup of safe and sustainable infrastructure and plants. We have a consolidated experience in the hydrogen sector that derives from over 60 years of activity in the engineering and implementation of a complex project. This know-how is now put at the service of the energy transition and the hydrogen value chain. We are present in more than 60 countries for over 60 years worldwide, with the engineering center, branches, subsidiaries, and yard. We are employing 32,000 people of 130 different nationalities. Next slide, please. Here is summarized what are our services range that goes from feasibility studies up to detailed design, including technical, economic, environmental, and social aspects, thanks to our specialized resources and our wide network of reliable partners and vendors. We can provide a complete range of integrated services: engineering, procurement, project management, construction, commissioning, and startup services. Thanks to the experience gained in the project delivery as FEED and EPC contractor, Saipem can support our client and investor also in the early phase of the project definition with conceptual study and early engineering service with an EPC execution-oriented approach. Next slide, please. Next. So a couple of years ago has been created this new business line, the new energies, and Saipem is fully committed to support our client on the frontier of the energy transition with the sustainable innovative solution for the long-term health of our environment. Leveraging on our worldwide experience as the EPC contractor in the onshore and offshore project. The new energies is a business line focused on sustainable, renewable, and low carbon technologies, such as carbon capture, sequestration and reuse, blue and green hydrogen, but also biofuels and biopolymers, hybridization of conventional plant, renewable energy, waste to energy, and water technologies. Next slide, please. So we can offer a wide range of solutions integrating all the technology involved in the hydrogen value chain, from green and blue hydrogen production, including CO2 capture, storage, and reutilization, till hydrogen final use, by applying the best solution for hydrogen conversion combined to CO2 reuse for chemicals such as ammonia, urea, and methanol. From, let's say, green hydrogen point of view, there are several market opportunities for its expansion in the existing industrial complexes such as ammonia and urea, but also refinery, methanol, and steel factory, where there is already an infrastructure to handle the hydrogen, and this is an opportunity to reduce its cost. As of today, we all know that the cost of green hydrogen is 2 times the cost of blue hydrogen, 3 times the cost of gray hydrogen. So key enablers to lower green hydrogen costs are technology and ecosystem development, and as well as, of course, the hydrogen policy strategy and regulation. The main challenges for green hydrogen project is the development of larger scale electrolyzer packages compared to the state of the art, and its relevant integration with the renewable power source. Next slide. So this is one of the projects that we are pursuing in the green hydrogen field in Italy. This is in particular in Italy, in Puglia. SAPEM, in collaboration with with the two important national industrial players, SNAM and Edison, and the project developer Alboran Hydrogen, we are developing the Green Hydrogen Valley project in Apulia, which represents one of the first initiatives in Italy for large-scale production of green hydrogen. The project aims to build and test 3 large-scale electrolyzer plants. We are speaking about 220 megawatt of electrolyzer capacity, powered by renewable electricity, 400 megawatt power from a photovoltaic parks, to produce green hydrogen and oxygen. The green hydrogen hub is located in 3 different sites in Apulia region. And Apulia region is the national leader region for the renewable energy production, which has developed a specific legislation to promote green hydrogen production. The produced hydrogen in each plant will be compressed locally, injected into natural gas pipeline to form blended gas for delivery to the potential end users, such as industries, or can be sent directly to the nearby end users through a dedicated pure hydrogen pipeline, or can be used for sustainable mobility, heavy, rail, and maritime transport. The electrolyzer will be fed with the wastewater coming from the purification plant of the aqueduct after a suitable treatment process. A part of the oxygen will be released into the atmosphere, part can be used in the chemical plants in that area, and part will be used in the purifier or the Apulian aqueduct to improve its treatment efficiency, contributing to a circularity effect. Next slide, please. Here is just represented the potential end use of the hydrogen. So we are speaking about industries such as refinery, steel factory, but also sustainable mobility. Next slide, please. This is the representation of the supply chain integration, because this is a unique integrated project that is covering the entire value chain. So renewable energy resources, hydrogen production, the oxygen reuse to Apulian aqueduct with circularity, the energy transportation system, and the integration with the final user. So hybridization with the green hydrogen of existing industrial complexes. The design brings together different components and equipment in a unique combination to create a sustainable and reliable energy system. You can move to the next slide. Here I have just summarized the main, let's say, opportunity that can be provided by this kind of project. Next slide. The main target of the project are for sure the production of green hydrogen at large scale as an energy carrier or feedstock through electrolysis and powered by renewable electricity. The multi-megawatt electrolyzer development, reducing the balance of plant and footprint through a more compact design, targeting cost reduction. Another important aspect is the control strategy for managing efficiently the input power and the output hydrogen. The operation of an electrolyzer system in a real-life condition in an industrial environment. And another challenge is to enable the user of hydrogen from hybridization of industrial complexes and mobility maritime application. Of course, this kind of project can stimulate also the research and development for hydrogen blending in the existing gas infrastructure. Therefore, the development and the demonstration of a hydrogen project with a total electrolyzer capacity of 2020 megawatt of green hydrogen can be an important milestone to develop the whole hydrogen manufacturing supply chain. Here, just to summarize, we have represented what is our journey, so what we are facing in order to develop this kind of project. So we started from the feasibility study and we are developing the business plan. And our path will be, of course, the front-end design, engineering design, plant design and technology scale-up, the plant construction, up to the pilot testing and demonstration platform in order to replicate this kind of plant in the future. Thank you for your attention, and I will be available to reply to your question during the query and answer session.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Giovanna. This was a extremely interesting presentation, and I would have so many questions to ask, but certainly for this type of project, you mentioned some critical success factors. Scale is one of them. Also, it was impressive to hear how you guys managed to collaborate with the government of Puglia to get some specific legislation in place to support the project. And the value chain integration. I think the value chain integration is also a very, very important factor for a project of this size and this magnitude, but extremely, extremely interesting. We will have a small Q&A session in a short while. Next, we have Mr. Arshad Mohammed Ismail, President and Group CEO of Bank Pembangunan Malaysian Berhad, BPMB for short, which is one of Malaysia's first development financial institutions, also known as DFIs. It's wholly owned by the Malaysian government through the Minister of Finance, Inc. BPMB has played a key role in Malaysia's infrastructure development for close to 5 decades. So a very, very important role in Malaysia. Mr. Arshad will share with us his thoughts on ESG and investment in infrastructure in Malaysia. Mr. Arshad also serves as a director on the boards of several BPMB subsidiaries, namely Pembangunan Leasing Corporation Sdn Berhad, PLC Credit and Factoring Sdn Berhad, and BI Credit and Leasing Berhad. With a varied career path since commencing his career in 1995 as a lawyer. His vast experience in corporate banking and trade finance, being both a chartered banker and a member of Institute of Corporate Directors in Malaysia. So without further ado, over to you, Arshad.
Thank you very much, Roberto, for the very kind introduction. Your Excellencies, Tan Sri Zakri Hamid, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and good morning, depending on where you are. I will spend approximately 15 minutes. I've been given strict instructions to keep to the time limit, and I will, I promise. And during these 15 minutes, I will speak briefly about some of the commitments that the policymakers and global leaders recently made in Glasgow, without repeating, of course, what earlier speakers have already spoken about. I'll then speak briefly about commitments made by Malaysia in this context. And finally, I will talk about initiatives that we have undertaken at BPMB and how we intend to enhance our commitments to ESG-related initiatives. Everybody, I'm sure, was following the conversations and discussions held in Glasgow. And at the end of that, significant conference, global leaders signed up to several commitments. And some of the key commitments that were made include a pledge to reduce greenhouse gas emissions significantly. And there was also a commitment to reduce methane emissions by 30% by the year 2030. There was a lot of conversation in relation to coal, which is, pardon the pun, a hot topic all the time. And coal, of course, as we know, or might not know, is responsible for 40% of annual CO2 emissions globally. So the commitments made relate to a stop to public financing for most fossil fuel projects by the year 2022. That's just a month away. But of course, there appears to be an escape clause because the language used is most fossil fuel projects. And also in relation to coal, there was a commitment to phase down rather than phase out coal-based projects. And this was primarily due to certain objections made by some of the key economies. I will leave it at that. And there were also commitments made with regard to phasing out fossil fuel subsidies. And in the context of Malaysia, fossil fuel subsidies are a key feature of the domestic economy, and it often becomes a political issue as well for a variety of reasons. So it remains to be seen how, as we go through these commitments, we work on reducing or removing completely fossil fuel subsidies in the context of Malaysia. At the national level, Malaysia has made commitments to achieving net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. We have also made a commitment to the implementation of a domestic emissions trading scheme. And a quick win, in my view, is the government's commitment to acquiring non-internal combustion engines for all government vehicles by 2030. Malaysia is also committed to maintaining at least a 50% forest cover percentage in the country. Now this, I would like to spend a bit of time discussing this particular commitment. When I looked at the statistics, I found that in 1990, in Malaysia, the forest cover percentage was 62.8%. And by 2000, it had dropped slightly to 59.9%. And as at 2020, it dropped slightly more to 58.2%. Now, from an aggregate perspective, taking into account the fact that the commitment is to maintain at least a 50% forest cover in Malaysia, it might not seem like we have a significant problem because we are currently at 58.2%. However, we, especially the policymakers and all other related agencies and decision makers, have to keep in mind that the localized consequences of deforestation cannot be set aside or cannot be ignored, notwithstanding the fact that at the national level, we are still quite a long way off from hitting the committed threshold of 50%. A couple of other commitments that we have made at the national level include a commitment to promoting zero waste as well as recycling initiatives. And finally, the establishment of a national greenhouse gas center that will be responsible for collating climate-related data. So with that overview, allow me to talk about the process that we have gone through in Bank Pembangunan with regard to ESG and SDGs in general. Back in 2019, we were focusing on 4 mandated sectors, or the so-called mandated sectors as they were known back then in BPMB. And these mandated sectors were infrastructure, oil and gas, maritime, and technology. And one of the criticisms that was leveled against BPMB at that time by one of our key stakeholders was that we were operating too much like a commercial bank. And that was a particularly painful criticism, because if we were behaving too much like a commercial bank, it also meant that we were perhaps not doing enough to play our role as a development finance institution. And this was a wake-up call for us. And we immediately almost literally went back to the drawing board to figure out what it is that we had to do to address this very real problem. And it was in the context of this conversation that we decided that we had to pay due attention to impact financing, or we had to understand the impact of the projects we were proposing to finance. And we roped in the World Bank to assist us in developing a framework that will help us assess the impact of projects that we intend to finance. And over a period of 6 months, together with the World Bank team, we developed this framework that we launched internally in early 2020. One question, and the impact assessment framework that we called MIND internally, which is short for Measuring Impact to National Development, is anchored to the UN SDGs, not all 17, but 5 of the UN SDGs. And during the development phase with World Bank as our partner, one question I had to answer was which of the 17 SDGs would BPMB, like the impact assessment framework, be anchored to? And I didn't have the answer. It was a question that we had to give a lot of thought to. And what we did was we mapped all 17 SDGs against our portfolio as it was then. And we discovered that 5 of the 17 SDGs were most relevant to the portfolio. And these 5 SDGs are SDGs 7, 8, 9, 10, and 13. So we made the decision to anchor our impact assessment framework to these 5 SDGs. And as I said, we have been running the framework for the past 2 years. And we now have a very good understanding of how the framework and the scores that the framework churns out will help us, or can help us, make informed decisions with regard to financing. Now, the other question we had to answer was whether we would reject financing applications where the impact assessment score didn't meet a minimum sort of threshold. So the decision we made was not to do that, simply because we had to educate ourselves on how this impact assessment framework was going to influence our decision making. However, our ambition in the near future, I hope it won't take us too long, maybe 1 or 2 years from today, our ambition is for Bank Pembangunan to draw a red line and declare that in the event a project that we are being asked to finance doesn't quite meet the minimum threshold from an impact assessment perspective, we would then reject that application for financing. And this is a very important perspective or mindset. Financial institutions are powerful institutions. Financial institutions have the ability to influence behavior in society. And if financial institutions do not use that immense power to influence the right behavior, then I think the opportunity that the financial sector has will be wasted. And in this regard, in addition to the banks, we have regulators also playing an active part in driving financial institutions and driving the financial sector players in the right direction. And I think this regulatory activism, if I may use that phrase, is very important to ensure that all these objectives that we have committed to achieve are achieved within a relatively short period of time. Now, if there is no push, I fear that the sort of a pace of growth in different parts of the world will be quite different, and that will not help us achieve the global objectives that we are expected to deliver by 2030 or by 2050. Now, the other thing that perhaps we should also give a lot of thought to is whether we are doing enough. The problem is, whilst we attend conferences, whilst we have all these seminars and talk about the various initiatives that we have committed to, we really have to ask ourselves whether these initiatives are significant enough, or are they, is it a case of, pardon the expression, kicking the can down the road? And I think we should ask ourselves these difficult questions on a regular basis. And that's why environmental activists or climate activists who keep asking these difficult questions, in my view, are a very important component of the overall climate change and environmental dialogue, because they keep the policymakers, they keep the bankers on their toes. If we don't have these people asking all the difficult questions, then we might end up doing a bit too little. By the time we realize that we have not done enough, it might be too late. And I will end my remarks here. And Roberto, back to you. I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much, Arshad. And it was very interesting to hear your presentation and to hear you talking about impact financing, and especially the In the Mind initiative. We'll go back to that in a second. I also totally agree with you on the role, the very important role that activism is going to play moving forward, and the role of activists to keep us, all of us, in checks and balances, so that we move from just talking to action. But it looks like that the Mind initiative is quite interesting, because you are moving to action, something that is really actionable and can create a real impact. So let me we have time for a couple of questions. Let me just start with you, since we just finished listening to your presentation. So based on the experience that you've gained so far using this framework that you have developed with the World Bank, how effective do you think this framework is to promote sustainability agenda? Does that need improving? And also, what sort of obstacles and difficulties have you encountered so far in its application? I'm referring to resistance from other stakeholders, from the business community, from other banks. So how do you see this developing moving forward, the implementation of this Mind framework?
Thank you for that, Robert. I think there are two parts to that question.
Yeah.
The first part relates to how effective the framework is. I must say, based on our experience, I find it to be extremely effective. In fact, when it comes to making financing decisions, the first question we have to answer is simply this: why are we proposing to finance a particular project? We don't start by talking about the credit issues or the credit worthiness of a particular transaction. The first question is, why are we proposing to finance a particular project? What is the developmental impact that this project will have? And in fact, it's not just at the management credit committee level, it's also at the board credit committee level that we first answer this question before we move on to talk about the credit worthiness and other aspects of a particular transaction. And it's very important as it sort of helps us create the right mindset when looking at transactions. So that's, I think, the first part of your question. The second part was in relation to challenges. Initially, we did face challenges getting information, getting data from customers, because customers would ask us, why is it that BPMB was asking for so much more information, so much more data that other commercial banks typically would not ask them for? So there was a lot of education that we had to go through. Not just educating our customers, but also educating ourselves and our bankers, because we had to, educate ourselves in terms of what kind of data we had to procure from our customers in order to help our internal impact assessment team run the analysis that will then give us a score, which eventually tells us what kind of an impact or the level of impact a particular project will have. And, yes, we are currently in the process of reviewing the framework. We will be re-engaging the World Bank and perhaps adding 1 or 2 more SDGs to the framework. And we intend to sort of keep running this framework to help us make financing decisions.
Excellent. Have you had the opportunity, or has it happened to you, to refuse a project so far because the ESG scoring was not so good?
Yes, we have. In fact, it was only a month ago that, well, I have to confess, at the management level, we approved the transaction, but when we took it to the board, we realized that we couldn't answer the question as to why we were proposing to finance a particular project convincingly enough. And as a consequence of that, the board rejected that particular proposal. So yes, it does have an impact on our decision whether to grant financing or not.
It's starting to kick in. I'm glad to hear that. Thank you very much, Asha. Giovanna, a project like the Hydrogen Valley, it's a huge project also from an investment standpoint, and putting all those pieces together must be extremely, extremely challenging. Just can you comment briefly on the main challenges that you have faced, and what are the key enablers for a project of that kind? If you had to generalize the concept and think about something like this being reproduced in another country like Malaysia, for example, what do we need to look out for?
Well, an hydrogen valley is a particular geographical area where several hydrogen applications can be combined into an integrated hydrogen ecosystem that is called the valley. That consume a significant amount of hydrogen, improving the economics behind the project. So it's typically a multi-million euros investment, so spread across a defined geographical area and covering a substantial part of the value chain. So from hydrogen production, storage, transportation, up to its end use in various sectors, so mobility, industry, but also energy. First, in a hydrogen valley is a cluster where various final applications share a common hydrogen supply infrastructure, combining supply and demand. So several challenges we are facing in the development of this kind of project, because a hydrogen valley needs a realistic project concept with an hydrogen value chain coverage that leverage local assets, so abundant renewable energy sources, and addresses local needs, such as the decarbonization of local industrial production. It is needed to develop a viable business case that links competitive clean hydrogen production with the off-takers' commitment. It's important disclosure during project development, also an effective partnering and stakeholder cooperation that can ensure the continuous commitment from all the parties involved. And of course, it's important getting political backing from policymakers and support from the general public. So,
how long has it taken, Giovanna, to put together this project as a concept? How many years?
So we started at the beginning of this year. So it's 1 year in which we are developing all the concept and the feasibility study, but also we are pursuing the permitting phase. Because another essential challenges is to have an efficient permitting procedure. It's critical for the success of hydrogen valleys, but in general for the green hydrogen project, because as you may understand, there is not a clear path from a permitting point of view. It's something that now we are building, so that's why.
And this has been it's been easy to work with the region of Puglia to get all the regulatory framework in place for a project like this.
Yeah, the selection of this particular region, it was really helpful because they have already in place a specific regulation for the renewable energy. So another topics that could be also important, especially for a company like us, is to have a harmonized standard, because we are first of all an engineering contractor, EPC contractor. So we have also a lack of standards in this field, and that's why there are a lot of challenges at the beginning of the project. But I think that during the time study and working on that, we are doing a good job, and I'm pretty sure that we will succeed in that.
When is the Hydrogen Valley going to be operational? Give us an estimation.
Yes, according to our plan and schedule, we will start the Green Hydrogen Valley in Puglia in 2025.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much for this very short but very insightful Q&A session. Thank you to the speakers. I would have loved to continue the conversation, but we need to continue with the program. Now, let us move to the second part of today's event, which consists of practical examples and best practices. We start by welcoming Ms. Claudia Carani to share with us the case study of the Lemon project, which is an abbreviation of less energy, more opportunities. Claudia is a senior expert at the Italian Energy Sustainable Development Agency. Her area of expertise is cities and communities, energy transition into low carbon economy. Claudia is also the EU project manager of multiple projects related to rational use of energy and renewable energy, supported by EU programs. Claudia, I hope you're there. The floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Roberto, for the introduction. Can you see me?
We're just waiting to see your slides. They should be on in a second.
Okay,
there we go.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Claudia Carani, and next slide, please. I represent here ICE. ICE is a non-profit association of only public members. We have been created in 1999 as a local energy agency, but as you can see from this picture now, we have partners from the whole Italy, and we assist our public members in the transition into low carbon economy. So we support local authorities, which are represented also by unions. So we have about 500 municipalities that are supported by ICE in implementing mitigation and adaptation projects. Next slide. I want to list the financing instrument the European Commission set up to support the mobilization of investment in the private and public sector. The idea is to provide the grant to support the technical assistance mobilizing investment. So there are different instruments that are created to launch this kind of innovative projects. The EIB, so the European Bank of Investment, set up a program that is called ELENA, that support investment in the public sector, in residential sector, sustainable mobility. The project that are presented to the EIB should foresee an investment higher than 30 million euro, and a leverage factor must be ensured. So every money coming from the EIB should ensure at least, depending on the sector, 20, 10 or 15 euro of investment. The grant covered the 90% of the cost, and the grant is reasonable with the project that is submitted to the EIB. So it should be about between 1 million to 3 million euros. So this sort of money can be used to provide free technical assistance to public or private to the private or public sector to launch investment. Then we have another program that before was in Horizon Europe, now is in LIFE program. So the participant should apply to a call and is to launch investment in the private and public sector. And the leverage factor should be more than 15 million euro for the public sector, while on the private is 10 million euro. But the leverage factor is 15. And here the grant is between 500,000 euro to 2 million and cover 100% of the eligible costs. So all the technical assistance is provided by the European Commission. And then we have a fund, EEF, is managed by the Deutsche Bank, and this integrates the grant for the technical assistance and the loan for the investment. And it's really interesting because the budget for the technical assistance is provided by the European Commission, the European Bank of Investment, also from the private banks. And here the leverage factor is 20, and the grant is about 500,000 euros. So, I think all of those are a very interesting instrument because accelerate the investment in the energy efficiency sector. Next slide. So, sorry, again, maybe there is some part that is not showed. Sorry. And we use all of those instruments since we think that is important to develop a pilot project to replicate them then in other area. And we had one Elena project supported by the EIB. Now we have another one, is not listed here, on the residential sector. We applied for a PDA project of the European Commission, Marte and Lemon, that I will present later. And also we are also advisor of the EEF fund. So we know all of those instruments, and all of them are based on the launch of investment with the energy performance contract mechanism. The energy performance contract mechanism has been defined by the European Commission as a financing instrument that can be used especially by the public sector, but also by the private, and include the possibility to pay some part of the investment, but then have a co-funding by the ESCO. ESCO is an energy service company that can cover part of the investment and recover the investment with the energy savings. So you have a contract that the public authority, for example, realize the investment for the energy retrofit of all the public buildings, and the ESCO, this private company, co-fund the investment, and after 9 years of contracts, recover the investment with the energy saving. After 9 years, the contract finish, and then the local authorities have the saving at full capacity. Next slide. It's very important for us to apply to those kind of projects, have a clear idea of the building stock we want to include in our project proposal. This is really important because sometimes we have many buildings, especially in the public sector. And so we develop a tool that supports us to assess preliminary the energy efficiency of the building and define which are the buildings that have priority for the energy retrofit. So we don't lose time and money to assess with energy audits and feasibility studies buildings that do not need the energy retrofit or do not have the capacity to have a positive business plan. Next one. And according also with intervention, for us is important to identify the measures preliminary to calculate the investment and also the incentives that are available for this intervention and identify the total investment of the building stock we want to retrofit. Next one. So Lemon project was financed by the European Commission under the call of Horizon on the PDA and was addressed to retrofit social housing dwellings in the province of Reggio Emilia and Parma. In Emilia-Romagna, the social housing is managed by public companies that are called ACER, while the building property belongs to the municipalities. Next one. So in Lemon, we wanted to retrofit 626 units that we selected with a preliminary assessment and involve an ESCO to retrofit the buildings in 15 years with a contract of 15 years, and also including the business plan financing, different financing that are available, because the problem is sometimes you have different funding incentives or funding, public funding, but the problem is to integrate all the financing opportunities in the business model. Next one. So the project was really complex. We involved 27 municipalities initially, and then the retrofit program only included 16 of them. And also in the buildings, in the public buildings, we had some private dwellings. So we have also some landlords, and we also have meeting with the regional stakeholders to involve them and implement the new politics. And we developed work tenders, but also energy performance contract tenders that include also the co-funding of the ESCOs. Next one. The part that was really important and is really interesting, the presentation before me, was the engagement of the bank to support also to cover part of the investment, because of course there are many incentives and grants, but sometimes you have to anticipate the cost and then have the payback of the investment. And in order to do that, the social housing companies need to have a loan from the banks, but this is a problem because once you ask for a loan to the bank, there is a conflict between the initiatives from the European Commission that want to support a large investment program and the goal of the local bank that are reluctant to support the investment in large investment program because the risk is really high. They prefer to work building by building. So our business plan was really interesting because it was including a high number of buildings, but they didn't accept it. Also, their social housing companies do not have the property of the buildings. They only manage the building. So the bank didn't find them able to provide guarantees. So it's really important to move from an assessment of the risk that is based only on the guarantees that can be provided by the building manager or building owner to the impact of the project. Because if we evaluate the project only from the risk point of view, is not possible to finalize this kind of project. And one of the innovations we included in the project is the introduction of the energy performance tenancy agreement. So the possibility to increase the renting fee in the dwellings, dwellings units, where the energy efficiency was reduced. The aim was to have a deep retrofit of the buildings, not only substituting the boilers, but also to retrofit the whole building. So implementing the insulation, window substitution, also introducing the digital metering to improve the management of the energy consumption. With this, we reduced it by at least 40% the energy cost of the buildings, and we defined the possibility to leave the 70% to the social housing and the 30% to the tenants. And this included the possibility to increase the renting fee. So you have a more performant building and dwelling. So you reduce by the 40% of the energy cost. You can integrate the renting fee with the fee to pay back also the investment. Next one. We have also some material. I think this is really interesting. It's in English, so it's a tenant manual to also to support the changing of behaviors of the tenants, because it's really important not to only to have a transition of the technology, but also a cultural transition that is integrated with the energy efficiency measures that are implemented. Next one. And here there are some barriers we had to overcome. Maybe I can focus more on the financial barriers. The main one was to, as I said before, to integrate different financing and incentives that are available. In particular, we have different deadlines, and also the problem of the pre-financing of the incentives. The energy performance tenancy agreement implementation is a politics decision, especially in the social housing sector. So some municipality didn't want to, some mayor didn't want to implement it, prefer to co-fund the investment. The social housing guarantee for the bank, this was really important because we couldn't find any solution. So we asked to the ESCO to anticipate all the costs, and this was a really really challenging, and also the risk for the local bank. So we can skip this one, sorry, and this one. Okay, I just want to show this. This was the EPC tender. The public procurement is a service tender, so is not affect the balance of the social housing of the municipalities. Is not an investment, and this is really interesting because don't impact the investment balance, but is a service. So the ESCO provide the social housing company has to provide to the ESCO a fee every month to cover all the investment costs. So in the Italian administrative balance is really important to have this amount on the service cost, not on the investment, because otherwise will affect the public balance cost. So I need to conclude. This is a picture of one of the site we retrofit. This is the preliminary picture. But as you can see, we have about 10 buildings, and here we have 176 dwellings, and here we include the insulation of the walls, insulation of the roof, boiler substitution, window substitution. So we have all the intervention included. There is a deep retrofit, so it's very interesting. So I should close my presentation because my time is finished.
Thank you very much, Claudia. Thank you for sharing with us these inspiring stories and this very interesting project. We will have some time a bit later on for a question to you. But for the interest of time, we need to move to the next speaker. And the next speaker is Matt Ellis, who will be speaking on the case study named Ignition. Innovative financing and delivery of natural climate solutions in Greater Manchester in the UK. Matt Ellis is the climate resilience lead at Greater Manchester Combined Authority, with over 20 years experience as a qualified planner. It is Matt's belief that the critical ecosystem services that our natural environment provide need protecting and planning for. Matt is greatly involved in Greater Manchester's effort to stimulate new investment into its natural environment, and also recently participated in the UIA-funded innovative nature-based financing project Ignition, which is the project that he will be sharing with us today. We have a recording, if I'm not mistaken, from Matt, but I believe that Matt will be present live during the fireside chat. So I would ask the technical staff to play Matt's recording.
Good afternoon or evening or good morning if you're joining us from Europe. And thank you very much for allowing me to come and talk to you today about the Ignition project, and particularly about what it's doing to create investable nature-based solutions for the climate emergency. Something I think hopefully will be really quite relevant for the topic of today's session. What won't come as a surprise to any of you on the call, I'm sure, is that nature pays. It pays us back in so many ways, some of which are financial, some of which provide social and well-being outputs, but it provides a huge amount of natural capital value. And this infographic here shows a set of natural capital accounts which were created for Greater Manchester a year or two ago, which start to expand on the annual monetary benefit coming out of its existing natural environment assets. So about 1 billion a year through things like health benefits, resources, noise abatement, water management, air quality. And when considered over time, these savings or cost avoided healthcare costs, 9 billion over 60 years, are substantial, and they are numerous. But the issue is it's quite hard to get nature to pay back. You'll think there of the numerous beneficiaries that might be willing to pay for some of those natural capital outcomes, values. There are investors and sources of capital in the market looking for green and sustainable projects. There are, in our instance, sort of natural capital projects that are demanding capital, but there appears to be a bottleneck or some sort of restriction. And there is a reason why large-scale investment isn't flowing in funding projects and getting a return, be that financial or otherwise. And we think that bottleneck is due to a number of things. So maybe outmoded business models which rely purely on public sector monies, or possibly the projects themselves are not investable. They don't have robust business cases, or they don't have the scale that the investment investors want, or they don't talk in some ways to their particular outcomes and benefits that they wish to secure and get a return on. So the challenge that we're seeing here is the connection of that capital to investable projects, and doing it at the sort of scale and pace that's required because of the climate emergency. And that's where the Ignition project comes in. To work on some of those barriers and challenges and to widen out that bottleneck that we perceive as delaying investment coming into our natural environment and making a return on that investment. And in doing it, it's taking a stepwise approach, technical proving, so actually looking at putting robust data and evidence around the performance of the nature-based solutions and therefore the value flows that come out of them. And then the thing that I will spend a bit of time sort of expanding on is the next part of Ignition, which is monetizing those value flows and packaging them up with projects into investment ready opportunities to take to market. The latter two steps to the right here are almost what happens if Ignition is successful and goes forward and moves into implementation. We will be aiming to raise initial investment next spring and delivery. And then, the idea is this is something that's supposed to be mainstream and replicable. So to illustrate this and illustrate a bit the journey that we've been on, I'm just going to talk to you now about our first investment program or investment case, which is a program of Greater Manchester sustainable drainage system retrofits on public sites within the city region. We started this journey with quite a simple premise that we had a quite simple investor save approach that we could take here. And this was due to our water company in the northwest of England, United Utilities, approaching the way it billed its non-domestic customers by looking at the chargeable area, the impermeable area of a particular site, how big it was in meters squared, how much was going to their system. The bigger the site, the more the impermeable area, the bigger the cost and operational impact on UU, the bigger your surface water element of your bill was. And that got placed into a series of bands. But United Utilities also allowed site owners, bill payers, to install sustainable drainage systems to put to ground or store water. And if they disconnected enough meters squared to essentially drop into the lower band, you could achieve an annualized saving on your bill. So, we set out to set up a climate adaptation services company, or CASCO, to work with the public site owners to understand how we would implement enough SUDs to achieve the band savings, to monetize that over a number of years, to then raise investment repayable finance on that saving process and build the SUDs and cover the capital and operational costs of them. The issues that we had was when we realized that the longevity and certainty around the band charging savings was insufficient for the investors to be confident, and it also didn't run for long enough that it would actually raise the full amount for the capital and operational implementation of our project pipeline. So we needed to take a different approach, and that approach was a blended finance approach. And this graphic here looks quite busy and scary. A lot of the elements are the same as they were previously. So we still have a CASCO, a special purpose vehicle. It's still working with public sector sites. It's still delivering SUDs, but in the kind of colored boxes on the left here, what you see is we've had to stack our beneficiaries. So there's still impact investment providing repayable finance over about 10 years relating to the banding charge, the bill reduction, but that wasn't sufficient to pay for the whole program or long enough. So we've had to approach other public sector beneficiaries. So for us, it's the lead local flood authorities that manage surface risk and put investment in. Our Department for Education, because about 50% of our sites are schools and they have a SUDS grant program, and approach the water company to discuss other funding opportunities within their investment program, and then probably a small amount of philanthropic donation at top. So to get our program investable, given some of the restrictions we have and where we are in time, we've had to kind of come up with a robust set of stacked beneficiaries, all receiving financial or non-financial outcomes, and understand how they're going to operate together, the financial mechanisms, and how the money will flow, and ultimately the sustainable drainage systems will be procured and delivered. And over time, we hope that, you know, we would also put performance monitoring and understand the wider financial and other values flowing back. You know, we would actually be able to sort of move it, as we said, more to mainstream, so that we can curate longer term programs of investable projects with a larger proportion of repayable finance and make it more mainstream. I'll kind of come to the end now by kind of reflecting on our journey and what I'm calling here the 3 C's of natural environment investment, because I think it will work quite, hopefully prompt a few questions. So the first one is confidence. So the image here you're seeing is the living lab at the University of Salford, which was created through the Ignition project. And this is the technical proving part. So it's looking at the physical performance and cost and business case of the different nature-based solutions. So this is the living wall. Not only is it edible, as it says, not only are we measuring kind of human factor benefits from it, we're measuring biodiversity, we're also measuring building internal energy performance, so that we can really start to understand the benefit flows and give some confidence there. The second C is capacity, and this is probably the most important. We were very fortunate in that we got 4.5 million euros from the Urban Innovative Actions EU funding programme. And that has essentially provided us with substantial technical assistance and investment readiness, funding and capacity to develop all of the things that are needed for that project pipeline of SUDS retrofits. If you were going to do this again, I mean, maybe hopefully our process and our templates would make it easier, but you really must think about that capacity and the resources that are needed. And this probably goes for low carbon green projects as much as natural environment projects. They individually, they're small. You need to have capacity to work them into investable pipelines. And that is important. As time goes on and it becomes more mainstream for investment, that capacity issue will be much less problematic. And then finally, sort of ending up on commitment. You know, you need the commitment, you know, particularly if you haven't got European funding, to provide that capacity to do that investment readiness work. Like we're working with public sector sites, with public sector grant, so you also need commitment and leadership in the public sector side of things to make sure that the sites and the projects can be brought into the pipeline. If they can't, or there's any concerns over that, then it immediately knocks back onto confidence, both for the investors and the other beneficiaries if you can't bring that. So commitment and leadership is really, really important. And I think I'll leave it there, and hopefully that will spark some thinking and thoughts that we can take into the fireside chat session.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your sharing, Matt. We will have the possibility, the opportunity to go back into your project during the fireside chat. So to continue our conversation, we now move to what we call the fireside chat session with Claudia, Matt, and also a representative from Capital Market Malaysia to join the discussion as the third panelist. We are delighted to have Zalina Shamsuddin. Zalina is the General Manager of Capital Markets Malaysia, an affiliate of the Securities Commission Malaysia that is mandated with promoting Malaysia's capital market both domestically and internationally. Zalina has over 20 years of experience, mostly in corporate advisory, and has worked in 5 countries in different regions in Asia, Middle East, and the Indian subcontinent. As a fellow of the Association of Certified Chartered Accountants, ACCA, with an MBA in finance from CASS Business School. Her key skills are in analyzing and identifying solutions for long-term growth and sustainability. So the first question is to you, Zelina. Let me see if you're here, first of all. Everybody's here, okay. After listening to the interesting approaches from Italy and the UK, the issues of financing green infrastructure projects stands out quite prominently. It's a very important issue. So let's look into this a little bit more, and let's focus on the Malaysian context. So we start with Zelina. So last year, the Security Commission Malaysia, through the organization that you lead, Capital Markets Malaysia, and together with Climate Bonds Initiative, you issued a report titled Green Infrastructure Investment Opportunities in Malaysia. We're going to use some of the key numbers and takeaways from that report to ask you a couple of questions today. So the report says that Malaysia needs a cumulative infrastructure investment of approximately USD 460 billion from 2016 to 2040. And in order to meet its Paris Agreement targets, much of this investment needs to be directed at green infrastructure. So the first question to you, Zelina, is can you make a general comment on the current status and future outlook of green infrastructure investment in Malaysia, sharing with us the characteristics of demand and supply, also with Malaysia being one of the largest issuers of Sukuk, the Islamic bonds globally. What role do you think Sukuk will play in the Malaysia green bonds space moving forward? Over to you, Zelina.
Hi, Roberto. Thank you very much. And it is quite an honor to be alongside such an esteemed range of panelists. So let me sort of quickly address your question, Roberto. I'm going to break it down into three sections, which is demand, supply, and the role of the Sukuk. Let me start with the demand. The reason why we came up with that report in first quarter last year, and we had been working on it obviously in the second half of 2019, was that we wanted to sort of pivot the use of the green Sukuk product to expand it to beyond renewable energy. So if I could just walk you through a little bit of history, I think the reality is everyone must recognize that the financial sector, or even the capital market specifically, the purpose of the capital market is to provide funding to fuel the real economy. So the direction of finance very much depends on the direction of the economy. And so the regulators on both sides, as Arshad had mentioned in terms of regulatory advocacy, I think we saw that shift. We saw the need to rejig finance the way it is to make it more sustainable. And the SC actually issued the SRI Sukuk framework, under which green falls under, as early as 2014. And when that issuance came out in 2014 of that framework, we saw very little traction in terms of actual issuances. Malaysia is unique in the sense that if you tracked all the green issuances that have been made globally, Malaysia is the only country that had its green issuance start in the private sector place. In other countries, it's always the sovereign or the government who's been issuing green Sukuk. So coming back to Malaysia's trajectory, so what happened was the government put in policies for renewable energy. That gave a clear sort of direction where the government wanted to go in terms of the renewable energy infrastructure. And that gave impetus to the private sector to step in. And so we saw a significant number of green Sukuks coming along in the space of renewable energy. Beyond solar, we also saw mini hydro projects being funded as well. The other area that we saw green Sukuk being leveraged on, and it's also because of the policies in place, was green building. So we saw a lot of those two activities coming along. And if you go back to the report also, and the reason why we came up with the report is we wanted to show that we can go beyond renewable energy, that there are other investment opportunities in Malaysia that could be, that one could leverage a green sukuk or a bond to fund. So in that report, we've mentioned projects like sustainable waste management, sustainable water management. We're talking about transportation, EV cars. So these are all sort of opportunities going forward. Historically, these sectors have been primarily funded by public sector funding, but they will eventually need to come to be a blending of private and public, because I think the private sector needs to play a role in this to actually meet our targets for carbon emissions by 2050. So that's the demand side. I think in terms of demand, I think there's a strong sort of pipeline coming along. In terms of supply in Malaysia, sorry, that's the supply side. The demand side is, if you look at our asset owners and asset managers, most of them are PRI members. PRI is an international organization that puts together a coalition of asset owners, asset managers, and the service providers that support sustainable investments. And most of our top players are already members. So clearly there is a commitment to sustainable investment, and they are looking for more supply of potential projects for them to invest in. So that's in a nutshell in terms of demand and supply. To go back to, in terms of the role of green sukuk, what I would like to say is, at the end of the day, the fixed income market is only cost efficient if the size of the project is above a certain size, right? So in Malaysia, it's about equivalent to ringgit 200 to 250 million and above. Then it's cost efficient to go into the fixed income space. So we recognize that, and that's why we've sort of pushed the agenda in the sukuk space. So not only have we come up with regulations, we've also come up with other ecosystem elements to facilitate this move. So for example, one is most of these green sukuks or bonds need third-party verification. And at that point, in as early as 2017, third-party verification was only got from international players like Sustainalytics and Cicero, which were charging in US dollars, which turned out quite costly. So how we addressed that was we dealt with it two ways. One is the SE set up a grant to sort of absorb the cost of third-party verification, so to ensure that the cost isn't a mitigating factor for issuers to issue it. In addition to the grant, what we started doing is we started working with the local rating agencies to amplify or increase their technical expertise to be able to provide locally based ratings or locally based third-party verification of the greenness or the sustainability of these projects. And I think that significantly reduced the costs. So from a regulatory point of view, I think Malaysia is in a good place. And I think it's just a question of the issuers stepping up and sort of issuing the right instruments.
But you're also echoing what Asha was talking about earlier on, the fact that it's extremely important to understand if we're talking about green projects for real, and being able to identify. Give me a second. If they satisfy ESG requirements in the way they should. Let's move to another question that is addressed to Claudia. Claudia, when considering an infrastructure project, it's important to start a dialogue with all stakeholders involved, especially with the local communities. In this context, it is important to identify the right communication strategy and make sure that the full project buy-in is secured beforehand. The tenants in your project played a very important role in the acceptance and the outcome of the project. You also went to the extent of convincing them to pay a higher rent as well. So could you please share some transferable practices from the Lemon project, particularly regarding the relationships with the tenants and the local community in general, some teachings that we could transfer to other similar projects.
Yes, of course. I mean, for us, the engagement of the stakeholders is really important. Of course, the first step is to identify the buildings aggregator. So who is able to launch the investment program and approach a large number of buildings, because so only in this way we can accelerate the investment and the transition of the buildings. But of course, the transition into a carbon economy need a systemic approach. We cannot look only at the technology investment or in the retrofit in the economy, economical investment. We need to look also to the transition of the people, of the behaviors, and in this case, the tenants have a key role, because we cannot, I mean, the social housing sector, we have low-income families mostly. Most of them come from other countries, for example, Africa, and they have different habits. They keep the heating system very high because they're always cold. So we need to open a dialogue with the people, understand their culture and their behaviors, and explain them how to manage the technology. We cannot just install innovative heating metering in the houses while they don't are able to read in Italian. So there is a cultural problem. And we also in the project, the Lemon project, included some capacity buildings activity for them. And we engaged them in some events where we explained them how to use the technology. We introduced it in their houses, and also in 2 buildings we installed a video in the entrance of the building where they shown how they can use the technology installed in the apartment. So it's really important to engage them in this capacity building activity.
Overall, sorry for interrupting. Overall, did you find resistance, or did you find people, very happy to listen to your new proposition?
Yeah, I mean, especially people from Africa, they really have different habits. They cook a lot for hours and hours. So there is a lot of moisture in the houses, and this affects a lot the heating performance. So it's not so easy. It's a long time, I think, capacity building.
Do you see this project replicated in other jurisdictions, in other areas, in other regions of Italy? Do you see this as a pilot that will have...
Yes, of course, we are replicating now. We have a really good condition for the replication, because in Italy there is a really important incentive. It's called the Eco Bonus 110%. So all the investment in the residential building and also in the social housing building, the investment related to the energy efficiency can be moved to the company that realize the investment. So this is really accelerating the retrofit of the building. Of course, we always include a systemic approach, because you cannot really achieve a transition if you not include people in the transition. So it's really important. So
Definitely. Definitely. Thank you very much. So let's go back to Malaysia for a second, and to Zelina. Zelina, in Malaysia, there are big green investment opportunities in renewable energy, green buildings, low carbon transport, and water management. Also, some large companies need debt capital to finance their transition to net zero or carbon zero. In some cases, this requires not just a simple marginal changes, but some companies really need complete metamorphosis, really gigantic changes. So the question is, how do we make sure that finance is mobilized to support projects and assets that can deliver clear climate benefits with the right level of ambition and in line with what has been presented in the recent IPCC report, as well as the discussions that took place at COP26. So how do we make sure that the right ambition for these projects is there?
I think, Roberto, the quick answer for that is we're no longer talking about green. I think everyone recognizes that the change that needs to come about in the economy is beyond just investing in green projects. What we need to start recognizing transition projects. So like you mentioned, the oil and gas industry, the chemical industry, the production industry need to revamp their business models and start moving to lower carbon emission targets. You can see in Malaysia, we've seen that because of the regulatory move in that direction, I think the stock exchange has started, has always sort of required sustainable reporting, and now collectively with assets from collectively with efforts from the asset owners and asset managers, you see the kind of disclosures and the kind of questions we're asking. We're no longer asking, you know, what is your sustainability footprint? We're saying, what is your transition plan? Where do you plan to go? And how do you plan to achieve the national goals for net zero by 2050? So we're starting to see there's a lot of conversation around transition. However, the challenge is not many people understand what transition could mean, what are the technologies involved. So there's a lot of understanding that is required in that space. And in terms of funding, so besides the green sukuk market or the sustainable sukuk market, we're starting to see a lot of traction in the private market space, because a lot of these new technologies have a higher risk level and are still unknown. And therefore you see that the private market players are coming in play and they're getting involved and starting to understand this risk. And this is a similar trend and trajectory that you see in any other country, and Malaysia is just going along that trend as well.
When you talk about transition financing, do you think that the financial community has enough understanding and insight into the strategies of these companies, companies that need to go this transition? So do they have enough understanding, and do companies make that transparent enough to the financial community for you guys to, I say you guys, but for the financial people to understand what we're talking about in real terms?
Okay, so no, they don't. Okay. I think what we all come to a place is everyone knows it's important. Everyone is aware that we need to do the shift. But you know, now if you're coming into the details of what kind of technologies we're talking about, what kind of disclosures that need to be done, what kind of data is needed, what kind of technical expertise is needed, I think we're still very nascent in Malaysia in that space. And that's why recognizing this, what SE did through CMM is we've set up 3 centers of excellence, very targeted centers of excellence. One for the corporates to rejig their business strategy, to be able to understand what their risks are when it comes to climate change, and to sort of formulate strategies to look at their risk management and accordingly disclose and engage with the investment community. So we're doing that with corporates. With asset owners and asset managers, we're looking at their technical skills in terms of how they invest sustainably, and also in terms of how they are stewards, how they engage with the investing companies and walk them through this journey. And it's a long-term relationship. And lastly, I think the third center of excellence is we're looking at product innovation. I mean, we can't use traditional financing products and use the same measures like financial returns to enable this transition to happen. So we have to have a wider scope of engagement and focus to make this transition holistically.
Definitely. Okay, but I think I go back to this in my next question to you a little bit, Matt. But let me go to you and let me ask you this: if you or other were going to replicate what you're doing through the Ignition project, what things do you feel are critical success factors which need to be considered? And also talking about financing, You started with a simple investment to save and borrow against that income stream over time to repay finance, and ended with a multi-beneficiary stacked or blended finance model. Can you reflect on the evolution of your financing model to this point, and what key takeaways might you have for others? How do you see this evolving in the future?
Yes, thank you. So taking the second part first, I mean, the key takeaways from that kind of transition we had from something that should have worked very simply with kind of current financing mechanisms, just borrowing against a standard income stream over time to repay finance, to something that required a number of inputs, including the public sector, to bridge the finance gap and de-risk potentially and make the whole thing work. I think the key takeaway from that is that we naively thought at the start of the project that we would have a very simple journey, and as Zelina has said, and our projects and products were quite small and nature-based compared to some of the financing products, or some of the appetite in impact investors, or some of the risks inherent in uncertainty timeframes, meant that we had to sort of go for this multi-beneficiary blended approach. And I think the key takeaway really is that took us quite a lot of time. I mean, maybe the writing was on the wall. Maybe we should have realized that because no one was at large scale borrowing and repaying kind of financial finance from nature-based solutions in this way, other than possibly carbon sequestration, that maybe there was a reason for that. So the key thing I think we understood was that we needed to probably start that conversation with other investors and beneficiaries much earlier, really start to understand what outcomes, potentially non-financial outcomes, we were targeting. And we see this similarly as a transition to something where we can get enough confidence in there that this becomes more mainstream, or other financial products or private investment will more routinely want to invest in nature-based solutions in this way. And I think the key success factors, if you were to do it again, is really the capacity and resources to do the project development and the pipeline development. I mean, they take, as I said, they take time and it takes money, and you need to build capacity in multiple partners that have maybe not done this before. I'm sure Claudia and the tenants and the social housing providers and the actual asset owners, you have to take everyone along the journey with you, and making sure you have the resources to do that piece of work is absolutely critical.
Matt, how do you see the opportunity of connecting nature-based solutions with carbon credits moving forward? Do you see that as an easy process? Do you see that as becoming more and more popular? What's your take on that? If you have any specific view on the subject.
I mean, I think there is potential. I think the issue here is potentially one of additionality. So obviously, natural approaches to sequestering carbon and some carbon codes do exist. It's if you wanted to also maybe get some wider benefits in terms of water management or biodiversity or nature recovery, and looking at who is paying for that, and can it be additional to the carbon that is sequestered. And I think, like Zelina said, not just in terms of financial products, we need completely different approaches to how we could maybe envisage a single intervention, and how it speaks to a number of investors or beneficiaries, and how you can be quite confident as an investor that if you're buying carbon from that project, you're getting carbon from that project. And if you're buying biodiversity or water quality, you're getting to that. And I think codes and standardization and regulation will really start to help us sort of be more sophisticated and do more with every kind of green project that we get involved in.
Yeah, definitely. Although carbon seems to be the closer one in terms of timeline, because hopefully a market will be developed, and at some point it will give a price to carbon, and the whole machine will get into motion. Let's go back to Malaysia for a bit. It seems that there is a growing, and this is a question to you, Zalina, there is a growing momentum in Malaysia on green infrastructure, and the sample pipeline demonstrates that most of the technology required is not new to Malaysia. In particular, public transport, solar energy. There's a lot of solar in Malaysia, so definitely well positioned for that particular technology. However, in order to meet the 1.5 degrees objective set in the Paris Agreement, it looks like we need to resort to some, I would call them game-changing technologies, and we need to bring them at scale very, very quickly. I'm referring, for example, to carbon capture and utilization and storage, CCUS, or direct air capture technologies to help us remove CO2 from industrial processes, but also from the air that we breathe in a very efficient way. Another example, we need energy storage, for example, energy storage technology. There's a lot of research going into that particular technology to make the renewable energy supply more efficient. The real game changer, in my point of view, and we talked about this today, is low carbon hydrogen that would require huge investments, as we heard from the SAIPEM case studies. So this links back a little bit to what we were discussing just a couple of minutes ago. Do you feel that the financial system currently has the competencies and the know-how to evaluate investments in such new areas, or do you feel they would try to push to stay within their comfort zone from a technology perspective?
I think in that sense, Roberto, that the financial sector has really moved on and come a long way. I mean, if you just listen to what Arshad is doing, a developmental bank is also focusing on this. So if the development bank is focusing on it, commercial banks are already 1 or 2 steps ahead. Everyone recognizes how important this is, because both the regulators have come into play and says we need to make that shift. We recognize that there are skill sets that you don't have. And you will see that nearly every financial institution I've engaged with in the last 2 years has built up a sustainability team, have incorporated risk analysis of climate change into their compliance. So this is a journey that the financial sector in Malaysia is already on. We may not have everyone on the same level playing field. There's disparity in terms of level of understanding, in terms of knowledge, in terms of resources, but we're definitely on that trajectory. And I think when the real economy needs that kind of funding, I don't think that will be an issue from the financial sector's point of view.
It's coming.
It's coming.
Be ready.
Okay.
So, no, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your insight. So we are swiftly moving towards the closing of this fireside chat. And what I would like to do just to close is to give you literally a couple of minutes each to just hear if you have some closing remarks. And I would start with Claudia, then we move to Matt, and then we close with Zalina. Claudia, anything that you want to share with us just into the finishing line?
Yes, I think what we can share is the opportunity to share today different frameworks was very interesting. I would thank you very much. And I think, the lesson learned we had from our projects is that it's really important to have pilot projects. So this is the most important part, to convince other actors to launch investment in the energy efficiency sector. So I would like to thank you again, and my suggestion is to identify a promoter of these initiatives to create pilot projects and make sure that they have a great visibility to transfer the experience in other contexts. So good luck.
Totally agree with you. And I think the beauty of the pilot project is definitely the opportunity, like in a setting like this, to share with others and hopefully get other people motivated to start something similar in other jurisdictions. Matt, how would you want to conclude? Do you have a final message?
I would probably echo the pilot projects and sharing, but at scale. So not just an individual exemplary building. Because there is an issue of the risk or the perception of risk or the confidence around returns. And actually some of the costs of contracting legal and due diligence for a €5 million or sterling set of projects is not that smaller than a 50 million. We need to have that kind of middle step, and the sorts of pilot projects and sharing them and showing they can be replicated and that the returns can come, and they do exist, and the contracting and delivery mechanisms are robust, will start to then really allow, I think, hopefully, many forms of finance and investment and contributions to flow into the sort of scale and pace of action that we need. I think events like this are really good in that regard to help share.
No, things are definitely moving, hopefully fast enough. Zelina, over to you for the concluding remarks.
Thanks, Roberto. I think besides COVID, sustainable finance or sustainable infrastructure has definitely brought everyone together. So I think it's great the way we keep sharing best practices in each other's country, and we're learning from each other. And I think that's the upside. From a sustainable finance point of view, what I would like to see more traction is that we need to redefine returns. Like Matt was saying, is yes, there's long-term financial returns, but I think the investors or whoever's investing in these things need to start looking beyond financial returns, start looking at the social impact, start looking at their role as a corporate citizen in this world, and start looking at things like impact investing, have other measures besides financial returns for us to really make a big difference in the next few years.
Yeah, the tools are there. We just need to start utilizing. Okay, thank you very much. I think it was a very insightful information and discussion. As usual, it would have been nice to keep talking for another couple of hours, but unfortunately, it's not possible. So thank you, everyone, for your engagement in this very exciting discussion. It's been a productive session for all of us. We appreciate your interest in learning, and this I'm talking to the audience, and to learn more about the investment practices in green and resilient infrastructure. And we hope that you have found this session insightful, as I have, and you have learned from our esteemed speakers. Our next IGEM webinar will be focusing on technology with purpose. And that will be happening on December the 8th. Don't forget to RSVP, and it's going to be again an IGEM event. So it will be broadcast in this platform. So you can sign in using the same method. If you're interested in learning more about our programs and activities at BCSD Malaysia, kindly visit us at bcsd.my. or leave your email address in the chat box. We will get back to you as soon as possible. We look forward to seeing you all again. Stay safe, stay in touch, and thank you, and see you again.